extra quick spot.
Oh, yeah. All right.
I tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Weird. Are they? Okay, whatever. We're going to talk about chapter 6. We're going to discuss it. I'm going to read from it. It's really important for us to understand exactly what's going on with the with this chapter and how it relates to what we were discussing yesterday. And an excellent opportunity for us to understand our author more. I think he's really offering us an opportunity to really understand him, because it is very easy to get our author misunderstood. It's very easy. If you're not paying attention. Okay, come on in. Walden, come on, sit down. Walden, come on, sit down. I'm sorry. I feel like I increased it because that's the subject. You have your group, actually. Okay.
Now we are everyone individual.
Okay, let me get you to sit down. Okay, but like I was saying, it's really easy to get the author misunderstood. But I think these two chapters, when you analyze them together and not individually, you learn his way of thinking and his way of communicating both of his positions. Both of his positions. And I think he probably would hold to this belief that an educated man is a man that is able to hold in his mind two positions on the same topic. You know, this is the sign of an educated man or woman. Being able to hold two positions at the same time on the same topic. And being able to open your mind up to both positions, you know, in studying them equally. Now, not saying that you're going to end up taking both sides, okay? You're going to choose a side. But the important thing is that you're able to hold both positions in your head and to analyze both of them to figure out which one would be the best for you. He is a really good example of this, and the way that he presents his arguments are really good because he does this, and he lets you know he's doing this. Come on. Okay. And so he does a really good job at this. If you're not going to stay quiet, I need you to leave today because I'm discussing something very important. You won't get deducted, you won't have a problem. If you can't be quiet, just leave. Just leave. Thank you. No, I have no problem with that. I need to have a fair and serious discussion today. Mr. Ali Mustafa, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You also, Mr. Yusuf. Anybody else who wants to follow him, go. I will not deduct points from you. I just need you to get out. See you later. Have a nice day. You can go if you like. The door's open. Anyone else who wants to go?
No deduction?
No deduction.
No problem?
No problem.
That's it? Soon? Yeah.
I got the video rolling. I saved it for you just in case anybody got a question about what I just said. You can go. Okay. Okay, quickly though, because you're wasting our time. Okay, bye. Okay, bye. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Come here.
Okay, all right. So, as I was saying, he does a really good job of presenting both sides of a particular topic and showing that he, at one time, if he has done this, at one time, he was of both positions. But he always concludes with what he thinks is a better position in his opinion. But he does it in a very soft way. He's not trying to force you to agree with him. He's only presenting the facts as, he has discovered them, and he's allowing you to make the choice. This is why it's easy to get him misunderstood. Because usually when someone is presenting an argument, a position, you just assume that they have taken a side, and that's the only side you're looking at. But you have to keep in mind that he is an educated man, so he's not doing that. Of course, he's trying to persuade you to agree with him. But at the same time, he's also considering the other side and presenting the other side's argument. I want to read the first day of reading of chapter 6, which it just says chapter 6, right above day 2 to chapter 6. And I want to read this. And then I want to, while we're reading it, I want to consider the questions that I asked yesterday during our discussion. I want to consider those questions, the answers to those questions, and some of the questions I said that we can't really continue or finish until we go over chapter 6 to some degree. And I want you to keep that in mind as to why I would have, or why I said that yesterday. So I'm at chapter 6, for those who want to follow along. I think that I love society as much as most, and am ready enough to fasten myself like a bloodsucker for the time to any full-blooded man that comes in my way. I am naturally no hermit, but might possibly sit out the sturdiest frequenter of the bar room if my business calls me thither. I had 3 chairs in my house, 1 for solitude, 2 for friendship, 3 for society. When visitors came in large and unexpected numbers, there was but the 3rd chair for them all. But they generally economized the room by standing up, and it's surprising how many great men and women a small house can contain. I have had 25 or 30 souls with their bodies at once under my roof, and yet we often parted without being aware that we had come very near to one another. Many of our houses, both public and private, with their almost innumerable apartments, their huge halls and their cellars for the storage of wine and other munitions of peace, appear to be extravagantly large for their inhabitants. They are so vast and magnificent that the latter seem to be only vermin which infest them. I am surprised when the herald blows his summons before the Tremont of Astor or Middlesex House to see come creeping out over the piazza for all inhabitants a ridiculous mouse which soon again slinks into some hole in the pavement. Now, okay, I want to stop there because I think we kind of get for surety here one of the questions that I asked yesterday. We for surety get it answered. And look back, and I want you to tell me which question are we're pretty sure about now. Which question are we pretty sure about now?
Being part of society.
Okay. All right, explain that.
And it's not that against it, but in a certain way, it doesn't like it that much.
Okay. So you agree with that, Ms. Heidi? That the answer to the question that we asked yesterday. And what was the exact question?
About working together.
Okay, about working together. Was there another question we can get answered? What's the other question?
The door, wisdom.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
What's the author opinion on confirming or being a conformist?
Was the author confirming being a conformist? Okay. All right. Anything else we can answer?
Solitude.
Okay. What about solitude?
I think he explains to us that being a person decided solitude is different.
Okay. Being a person who, say that again?
Stands
Sands. Solitude. Okay. So let's simplify the question a little bit. So is he against being around people? Okay, so we go back to what the psalmist said. So he's not, and we get that very clearly in the very first sentence. And I mean, of course, I don't know 100%, but I can assume that being that this is the next chapter, that he's making it clear because of how much he really pushed the whole spending time alone and being in solitude in the 5th chapter. That in this chapter, I think he really wants to make a point. And he makes it clear. He said, I think that I love society as much as most. So he's not against being in, with, around people. That he's a very sociable person. But at the same time, he proved to us a point in chapter 5 that happiness can be from solitude. And one who can be happy in a situation where you're by yourself is actually a very good and healthy thing. And we all should be able to experience happiness in solitude. And even at the beginning, we talked about this yesterday, that he even said that, this was something unpleasant. The idea of being in solitude was unpleasant for him at first. That he didn't actually think he could do it. And he's reconfirming that with this very first sentence as he explains that he loves being around people. He loves talking to people. He loves to engage people, to engage in debates and discussions, and he likes to hear what other people have to say about different issues. He's a really sociable person. But he also discovered something that he knew before he discovered it, that he really enjoys also being alone. And that as much happiness as he experienced or has experienced in the crowd of people, that he can also experience that same experience being by himself. So he learned how to enjoy himself. And going back to the 4th chapter, he makes that point also in the 4th chapter, when he talked about his advantage he had or has over the townspeople, the people who are in the town. That, he learned he discovered how to enjoy himself, amuse himself. He didn't need all of the trinkets and different things of entertainment that they were using at the time in order to entertain and make themselves happy. He discovered how that he can actually entertain himself. So he's bringing these points home and back again, revisiting them in different ways. Yes.
But didn't get entertained, like around people.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. It's both. It's both. He has discovered. See, the reason he did this 2 years and 2 months in the woods is he wasn't really sure, 100%, if he could get the same enjoyment by himself, with himself, as he does, obviously, when he's with people and engaging people. He also wanted to prove to all of us that, you don't have to have people around you to, be entertained and to be happy. So he proved it to himself, and we know he was proving it to himself because he admitted that it was an even unpleasant fault to be in solitude. He said that in the 5th chapter. So we know he is actually proving it to himself as well as the reader and others that, he wants to find out Can I experience the same happiness? He had a theory. It's like a scientist. He had a theory that it could, but he didn't know 100% until he did it. And now he's sharing with us the results of his findings. And this is what Walden is, the results of his findings. And he found that, in fact, you can find happiness. Okay, so, now, he also brings another point that he keeps mentioning, or he's been mentioning since the beginning, and that is the size of a house. And how some people feel that if you're going to entertain guests, if you're going to be happy, you need space, you need a big house with a big reception hall, and that's the only way the guests are going to be happy. But he's proving the point here that he has had as many as 30 people in this little house. And you've seen pictures of the house. Can you imagine 30 people being in here? 30. That's more people than can fit it, that we have in our whole class. And at the same time, did I get to that yet? Wait a minute. Oh yeah. And at the same time, they didn't even notice the fact that they were around each other, because they were enjoying their company, each other's company so much. Talking and discussing and stuff like that. They didn't even realize that, hey, we all in this little tiny house. Yes. Okay. All right. So let's continue. I hope I didn't just talk about something that we didn't read. Okay. Let's continue here. I think I did. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I did. Let's get jumped up a little bit. Warning convenience. All right, I'm going to just start from the beginning. Okay. One inconvenience. Actually, I did go over a point that is in this chapter. It is in this paragraph. That last point is here, so think about that as I read. One inconvenience I sometimes experienced in so small a house, the difficulty of getting to a sufficient distance from my guest when we began to utter the big thoughts in big words. You want room for your thoughts to get into sailing trim and run a course or two before they make their port. The bullet of your thoughts must have outcome. It's literal and ricochet motion, and falling into its least and steady course before it reaches the ear of the bearer. Else it may plow out again through the side of his head. And I know you know what he means there, the idiom, in one ear, out the other ear. Yeah, okay, you got that. Also, our sentences wanted room to unfold and form their columns into the interval. Individuals, like nations, must have suitable broad and natural boundaries, even a considerable neutral ground between them. I have found it a singular luxury to talk across the pond to a companion on the opposite side. In my house, we were so near that we could not begin to bear. We could not speak low enough to be heard. As when you throw two stones into calm water so near that they break each other's undulations. If we are merely locutions and loud talkers, then we can afford to stand very near together, cheek by jaw, and feel each other's breath. But if we speak reservedly and thoughtfully, we want to be further apart, that all animal heat and moisture may have a chance to evaporate. If we would enjoy the most intimate society with that in each of us, which is without or above, being spoken to, we must not only be silent, but commonly so far apart bodily that we cannot possibly hear each other's voice in any case. Referred to this standard, speech is for the convenience of those who are hard of hearing. But there are many fine things which we cannot say if we have to shout. As the conversation began to assume a loftier and grander tone, we gradually shoved our chairs further apart till they touched the wall in the opposite corners, and then commonly there was not room enough. Point he is making here, that actually, a small house, a small room to entertain guests is, especially when you're engaging them in conversation and debates, is actually better. Because when you're in a big room and you're yelling at each other, a lot of what you're saying is lost. Not only in meaning, but the other may assume that you are getting, irritated and upset. But when you're in close quarters and you're discussing something, you tend to understand what the other person is saying better. Thus, you have a much more enjoyable conversation. I think we can relate this to society in general, in the fact that we need our space. No matter how close in quarters you are with people, because he's literally talking about space here, but he also is talking about space in regards to giving each other our rights to believe what we want to believe, to live how we want to live. Everyone deserves a certain amount of their own individual space and not be crowded. I know I'm digging a little deep, but it is under the surface here what he's saying. And not be crowded by so many regulations and rules that you don't have room to do anything. You need that bit of freedom theoretically. But literally, when you're with someone, that type of space is not necessarily a good thing as far as when you're trying to conversate with people.
Who are the people you actually talking about?
Visitors. That's the title of this chapter is Visitors. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. The title of this chapter is Visitors. See, he's talking about when people come to visit him. One would assume that real people. No, friends. I mean, he knows people. Because one would assume that he lives in this one-room house. They would assume that when he has visitors, it's very uncomfortable. How can he entertain anybody? Well, he's showing that actually it's better than if he had like these huge halls in his house where he can entertain people. Yeah.
After saying that, but then he goes back to the point saying that he doesn't like being around people that much.
No. He's going, okay, literally being close to each other, especially when you're conversating, discussing things, is good. Because not meaning is not false. But theoretically, every individual needs their space.
So he's talking about both sides.
He's talking about a literal and a theoretical in a theoretical sense. Literally, physically, it's good when you have guests that you're in a small room. You can talk normally, you don't have to yell, and no meaning is lost in what you're discussing. But theoretically, as an individual, because remember, the topic of this section is individualism. As an individual, we need our space. We need our space. We shouldn't feel crowded all the time. We should feel that we have space to, allow our thoughts to be our own and express ourselves in the way that we feel should be expressed. But that doesn't take anything from the fact he starts off the chapter with the very simple point that he loves society. He likes being around people. In a moment, let me do one more little paragraph, and then we can do all that. Okay.
The thing you said, he said that when they're in a big house and like imagine magnificent, but he told me he wasn't that rich, so how could he experience that?
Never told you he wasn't rich.
He was educated.
Yeah, but no, I didn't say that. In rich in what sense? Rich in the possibility of being. Okay, so when we go back to what he said in chapter 1, he made it clear that one day he will have the big house. So, but at the present time, he's trying to prove a point that bigness is not needed for happiness. And this is an extension of that point by saying that some people feel that, especially when you have guests, that you need a big hall to entertain them, and without that, if they feel close in quarters in a small room, nobody will be happy, including the visitors.
Does he have a big house with all and stuff?
At this moment, he doesn't. He has one room cabin.
When he went to live in those, before he went to
So you got to go back to chapter 1.
Yeah, I asked you, you said no. So how could he know that?
I don't think I said no. I don't think I said no. I don't think I said no.
We didn't discuss exactly how.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
When we asked you, was he that rich?
Rich.
He was educated.
I said he was educated. No, actually, the question was, what status was he? Would he be considered in? And I said that in that time, being as educated as he is, that he would be considered as in the upper class. You know, because even if he didn't have actual money at that moment, he had the potential to get that. So that's why you would have to consider him in that class. Yes.
But being able to compare between two houses, he used to have a big house, we were actually
Okay. Okay, so I tell you what, before I answer that question, I want you to go back to chapter 1. Okay? Because he answers that question when discussing this whole idea of living in a cabin. If you don't find the answer to that question, then I answer it. Okay. My best room, however, my withdrawing room, always ready for company, on whose carpet the sun rarely fell, was the pine wood behind my house. Thither in summer days, when distinguished guests came, I took them, and a practiced domestic swept the floor and dusted the furniture and kept the things in order. So he had a maid. Wow. Did he have a maid? Okay. So the practiced domestic was him. He taught himself to be that way, didn't he? Yes, he taught himself how to clean and all that. Okay, this room he's talking about, is it inside the house or outside the house?
Outside.
It's outside, okay. Oh, I just wanted to make sure. But that was his best place. So his choice was not to entertain company in the house.
The house is only one room.
What? Outside the house or inside? No, inside the house was his only room, one room. But his favorite place to entertain his guests was not inside the house.
It's like the outside.
Yeah, outside, in the back, in the shade. It's just a real fancy way of saying my best place to entertain was a little setup that I got outside in the shade. I mean, so, but, you know, in his rhapsodic style, he says it in a different way. Here we go. If one guest came, are we following? If one guest came, he sometimes partook in my frugal meal. Yes. And it was no interruption to conversation to be stirring a hasty pudding, or watching the rising and maturing a loaf of bread in the ashes. In the meanwhile, but if 20 came and sat in my house, there was nothing said about dinner. Though there might be bread enough for two, more than if eating were a forsaken habit, but we naturally practice abstinence. And this was never felt to be an offense against hospitality, but the most proper and considerate course. The waste and decay of physical life, which so often needs repair, seemed miraculously retarded in such a case, and the vital vigor stood its ground. I could entertain thus 1,000 as well as 20. And if any ever went away disappointed or hungry from my house when they found me at home, they may depend upon it that I sympathize with them at least. So easy it is, though many housekeepers doubt it, to establish a new and better custom in the place of the old. You need not rest your reputation on the dinners you give. For my own part, I was never so effectually deterred from frequenting a man's house by any kind of civility whatever, as by the parade one made about dining me, which I took to be very polite and roundabout hint never to trouble him so again. I think I shall never revisit those scenes. I should be proud to have for the motto of my cabin those lines of Spencer, which one of my visitors inscribed on a yellow walnut leaf for a card. Arrive there, the little house they feel. Nay, look for entertainment where none was. Rest is their feast, in all things at their will. The noblest mind, the best contentment has. Contentment has. Okay, so here's the question. He likes big fancy dinners and he likes giving them, yes?
No.
No? No? Okay, so he's making his last point about visitors. Well, not his last point, but he's making another point about visitors. And that is, as some people assume, that you must shove the food down the visitor's throat when they come to your home. I'm talking about what he said. That you must, this is his point. This his point? That you must shove food down the visitor's throat when they come to visit you. No. Actually, he is proving a point. And what he is saying is that when the entertainment is that of an intellectual, conversationally stimulating type, when that visitation is that type, food becomes not even a thought. As the visitors who visited him weren't really interested in food, yet they still had a very enjoyable visit, according to what he's saying. And how, in his experience, how he hated to visit someone who made this big deal about feeding him while he's there. This parade, one thing after another, have a little bit of this, have some of that, have a drink of that, come on, you gotta drink this, you gotta taste that, and he took that to mean, don't come back, okay? Because if you come back, we're gonna shove some more food down your throat. Because you can't refuse food. I mean, well, you can, but you're not supposed to when you go to somebody's house. You're supposed to smile while you're eating it.
And he also thought that he didn't give his visitors food, wouldn't be like an offense to them.
No, well, but I kind of, it wouldn't be, but I think it was probably that because they knew that, he had a small setup. When they walked into his house, they saw his kitchen.
Was he the person there?
Here's another point that he's making here. I don't know if you picked this up or not, but he's also interjecting his belief in diet in here. And as a vegetarian, one of your beliefs in diet is that you don't feel like, or you believe that the healthier option is not to eat all the time. Is to eat as little as possible. And this was a belief of his. So, whereas some people felt that when you visit someone's house, you got to feed them to make them healthy. His opinion is, and he's interjecting it here, you got to kind of read in between the lines what he's saying, that actually you can stimulate this person's health by not even feeding him, because the healthier choice is not to eat all the time. And let's go back to where he says that. Okay, okay, let's start here at the, he got long sentences. I guess we got to start in the middle of the sentence. No, after. But if 20 came and sat in my house, there was nothing said about dinner, though there might be bread enough for two, more than if eating were a forsaken habit. But we naturally practiced abstinence, and this was never felt to be an offense to hospitality, but the most proper and considerate course. The waste, and here we go, the waste and decay of physical life, which so often needs repair, seem miraculously retarded in such a case. And the vital vigor stood its ground. So he's implying that by them not eating, they're actually aiding their body in preserving itself and keeping away from the decay, the natural decay that bodies have, anyway. And in addition to that, this preserving the body by not eating will also cause the body to be have more vigor, more life, or more strength. So he's interjecting his diet here. So I want you to make a point of that, because when you're trying to get a picture of Henry David Thoreau, we already know that he's a vegetarian, right?
Is he a vegetarian by choice?
We already know. No, actually, being in the woods caused him to not be a vegetarian by choice. But we'll talk about that later. Okay, but by choice, he's a vegetarian. And in addition to that, he also believes that you shouldn't eat all the time, which actually was a belief for most people during this time. They would come, if they were able to get in a time machine and come to today, they would be completely disgusted with us. Because we eat all the time. We constantly eating. That's something you didn't do in those days. You know, you had designated times to eat, but this snacking stuff was unheard of. People didn't snack. You know, constantly eating. Like we probably eat 6 meals a day. They ate 1 or 2. And it was half of what we eat today. It's really, I mean, if you're just curious about the amount of food that people used to eat as opposed compared with today, they actually have, I know they have articles on it, but they may even actually have websites that compare not only the size of the amount of the meals, but also the size of the meals, the size of the portion. How big of a glass of milk that people drank 100 years ago compared to today. Coca-Cola. How big was the glass of Coca-Cola 50 years ago compared to today? All of that. They got all of that, and you'd be shocked at how much we intake. They got even pictures how much sugar was eaten 100 years ago compared to today. You know, you got this little tiny thing, you got this big mountain. I mean, you know, it's very interesting when you look into that. But he's definitely talking about it here. I think makes him kind of another pioneer in another thing, which is the diet and belief in that eating less and not eating meat actually is healthy, which you didn't find a whole lot of people talking about that then. Yes, maybe they didn't know about it, I don't know. But he's very educated, says Mike. Yes, ma'am. He's a well-known man. He's not somebody who's not known. Everybody knows him. In addition to that, he went to Harvard, so he's going to have a whole lot of alumni from Harvard that knows him, and you know. But he was infamous. Let's put it like that. He was infamous, especially in Concord. You know the difference between infamous and famous, right? He's well known, maybe not in the most fantastic, wonderful way. But they did find him very weird, but they also found him very interesting. But the people who knew him, people who went to school with, and people who did business with, they knew him as being highly educated. And as with anybody, when you come in contact with someone educated, you just want to know them. You just want to be around them. You want to talk to them. You want to make them your friend. So he has gathered a lot of friends. But I guess another question would be, and I'm not finished with visitors, here's another question that I think we're probably going to entertain in the next lesson, and this brings us to a good point. Does he consider them friends? Because we often have people that, call us friends. But we may not have all of these people as friends. Does he consider them friends? Is he a very trusting person that, when he, can we answer that question in this chapter? So this is a good question. A very good question. Okay, so we're going to stop here. Okay. In Islamic school.
We'll talk about tomorrow.
Yeah, that's rolling the hard way. We don't want to roll quite that hard. We want to get one of them little minibuses.
What's up?
Tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Everybody's gone out of their mind.
Welcome to Mr. Quick's class.
Welcome to Mr. Quick's class. next class. Oh, yeah. All right. All right.